or monitor on your phone, whatever is appropriate. But due to social distancing that we are trying to adhere to, we have to ask you to stand out if you do not have a chair. As for everyone else, make sure that your electronic devices are on an airplane mode so they do not interfere with the camera system and audio system in this room. Make certain that there is no sound made from them. And when you answer the roll, members, if you will, as usual, indicate whether you are attending remotely, and if so, what location. And if you're in the room, just please say so. And Mr. Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Representative Beckler.
Here in person.
Present, thank you. Representative Bentley.
Here in person.
Present, thank you. Representative Blanton. Representative Bridges.
In the room.
Thank you. Representative Dossett.
Here in the room.
Present, thank you. Representative Fisher.
Here in the room.
Thank you. Representative Fleming.
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Flood.
Present, Annex Office.
Okay, thank you. Representative Fugit.
Here in the room.
Thank you. Representative Gentry. Representative Goforth.
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Hale.
Present here in the room.
Thank you. Representative Hart. Representative Hatton.
Here in the room.
Thank you. Representative Nemus. Representative Palumbo.
Here in my annex office.
Thank you. Representative Prunty.
Here in the room.
Thank you. Representative Raymond.
Here in the room.
Thank you. Representative Reed. Thank you. Representative Riley. Thank you. Representative Santoro.
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Tipton.
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Wilner.
I'm here in my annex office.
Thank you. Chairman Petrie.
Present in the room. We have a quorum, and the only item on the agenda for today's consideration is House Bill 563, sponsored by Representative Chad McCoy. And if he will approach the table, introduce yourself for the record. If you have anyone that will be co-presenting with you in person or remotely, depending on the number, we'll need to administer the oath. So if you will state your name for the record, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Chad McCoy, State Representative, 50th District, Nelson County.
You raise your right hand.
No. Do you do the legislators too?
I do everybody.
I'm an officer of the court. I'll be glad to.
I know.
It's not a problem.
And I am also. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Please proceed.
And I do have some folks here with me, some superintendents that have come from around the state that would like to speak both for and against. What I thought I would do, Mr. Chairman, you all heard me talk yesterday. I'd be glad to give you the spiel again if you want me to, but
I have a motion on the committee sub, and we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Committee sub is adopted. We have before the committee House Bill 563 as amended by the committee sub. And we did have a joint meeting of the Senate and House Appropriations and Revenues Committees yesterday, and there was good discussion on House Bill 563. All members of this committee would have been included in that, their choice of attendance, but were included. I don't know that we need to rehash all of those details, but I would suggest that
Some
you at least
highlights?
hit the highlights.
yes, sir. Be glad to. House Bill 563 is in the committee sub. It's certainly not anything new. It's an amalgamation of two different bills that have been out for quite a while, quite frankly. One was a Senate bill, one was a House bill. And what we've done is taken two school choice bills and put them together. The first section deals with what I call schools without borders. And what that section requires is that a school district adopt a policy that would accept out-of-district kids. Now, that doesn't mean they have to take out-of-district kids if they've got capacity issues or whatever their policy is going to be. We just want them to have a policy. And then it also says that it's not going to take effect until July of 2022. But when it takes effect, if a student comes from a different district to your district, then you get to count them in your ADA. That is your average daily attendance. In other words, the state portion of the SEEK dollars will follow them. A couple other things in that House bill, or in that section, sorry, on the School Without Borders. Some concerns were raised to me that this might be used as a recruiting tool for athletes. Let me be clear. I am here solely focused on educating kids, period, and giving parents choice. So I put in this bill that if you move pursuant to this policy, you cannot play sports for 1 year. And I know that's probably harsh and that's probably not fair to some kids, but really I don't care. This is about getting a good education, and that ought to be your main goal as you're coming through life. The other thing that's in there, in that first part, is that we're going to look at the SEEK formula and how we can be sure that state money, or all monies, follow kids. We need the amount of money to be fungible, and so we're looking at a task force that's going to involve superintendents, it's going to involve the KDE, it's going to involve legislators, try to get everybody at the table to spend the next year really doing a deep dive on the SEEK formula. So that's part one. Part two is something called education opportunity accounts. And education opportunity accounts are a way where a private individual or a private business can, once they get Department of Revenue approval, make a donation to an education opportunity granting authority. And if they make a donation, they get a tax credit. Now, once that part's done and we've got money in these account granting organizations, parents out there, if they are at 175% of the reduced lunch level, can make an application for a number of things to use for their children's education. It could be tuition at a public school, but only at a public school. There is no private school tuition in this bill. That has been removed. Every child could use it for tutoring. They could use it for speech therapy, for example. Or if they wanted to take, one of the examples I always use is that we didn't have computer science in my high school, and my kids did it online. And so they would be able to use this money, if we qualified, to go take an online class to get some credit. So the threshold's at 175, but I hope everybody understands that's just gets you in the door. That doesn't mean you get money. Everything after that is means tested, just like we do all the other grants in education in the world. And so just because a person makes an application and qualifies, that doesn't mean they're going to get everything they ask for. And hopefully we will focus this. It's designed to get the poorest of the poor first, so that we help those families that don't have the means, actually give them some means to do what we've done in the first part, which is maybe change districts if they want to. If they feel like it's a better fit for their child to go somewhere else, here's some money to help with that. So that's the overview. Happy to answer any specific questions. Also happy, Mr. Chairman, for other people to talk for and against.
With those things said, thank you very much. If you will, of those persons you have with you that would be in favor of the bill, if you would go ahead and bring those in, at least in a choice manner. We have about 15 to 20 minutes for this. And then we'll take up opposition presentation. If you will introduce yourselves for the record, then I'll administer the oath.
Sorry. My name is Gary Fields, Superintendent, Bowling Green Independent School District.
Thank you. And
I'm David Cox, Superintendent, Corbin Independent Schools.
thank you. Raise your right hands. You swear or affirm to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Proceed.
Thank you for letting me speak this morning. Just to give you a little bit of background of Bowling Green Independent, to make sure that we know where Bowling Green is, but what does our school district look like? We are a small landlocked school district that our boundaries were set in 1959 and haven't moved since that point. We have a history and tradition of excellence. Our motto is excellence is worth the effort, but effort is where we put our emphasis. We continually work to improve and meet the needs of all students in our district. We have approximately 4,200 students preschool through 12th grade. We have 7 schools, a high school, junior high school, and 5 elementary schools. Western Kentucky University sits in the middle of our school district. So a lot of campus sprawl and student housing takes up a lot of our land mass. Over 62% of our students are free reduced lunch students. We have 14% of our students are multilingual. 50 languages are spoken, with Spanish and Swahili being the 2 dominant languages. 20% of our students are African American. 19% of our students are Hispanic. We are actually one of the school districts who are supporting Senate Bill 77, which will allow us to increase our minority representation on our superintendent search when that time comes, hopefully not too soon. Over the last several years, we have found that families choose a district, in our mind, and what we see for 4 reasons. Proximity to a parent or guardian's place of employment, which provides opportunities for them to be involved with their child's education. That may include eating lunch with the child, attending school day activities, or possibly volunteering in a classroom. School employees across Kentucky, like myself, are provided that opportunity by legislation that you passed a few years ago. I live in a neighboring school district, but am allowed to bring my children to Bowling Green Independent because of the law that you passed. Proximity to their nearest child care provider or after-school program. This may include proximity to grandparents or even allowing families more opportunities to participate in after-school programs or therapeutic services. Desire for their children to have the opportunity to participate in a specific program or service offered at that school district. And finally, affinity to a school or district based on tradition, with the opportunity for many in our community to have their children grow up being purples, as Bowling Green High purples, like their parents, their grandparents, or even their great-grandparents. We have 3rd and 4th generation families in our school district. Non-resident students are from diverse backgrounds, have diverse abilities, and are enrolled in a variety of programs and activities. Public school choice allows the SEEK funding for public school education to follow the child to the district of enrollment. The district of residence continues to receive local tax revenue with no per pupil expense. So my local tax money is not being used for my children. They do not attend the school district where I live. Districts of enrollment would be limited by their own capacity, limitations of their own walls. It would not permit an unlimited number of out-of-district families, but would allow more choice. I believe that allowing SEEK funding to follow students to a district of enrollment instead of being determined by the district of residence creates more opportunities for innovation in our school district, and believe it will do the same across the Commonwealth. Competition pushes schools to find their strengths, to do better, and to be better for all students. This morning, I used the word opportunity many times over the past few minutes. The opportunity for public school choice is the most important use of that word in House Bill 563. Thank you.
Once again, I'm Dave Cox. I'm from Corbin Independent Schools. I'm the superintendent there. I've been there for about 5 years and appreciate your time. I know I will keep my comments brief and I'll try not to rehash what Mr. Fields said because he said it much more eloquently than I could have. I'm going to speak from just a little different perspective, if that's okay. All districts have strengths. All districts have things that work well for them, maybe some things that don't work well. We're no different than anybody else. Our particular stance has always been, for the 29 years I've been in Corbin School District, is that parents should make that choice for their children. Athletically, academically, however that's been. We have signed an any and all agreement with everybody that has asked us to ever since I've been there. We have never in 29 years that I know of tried to prevent an athlete or even challenge an athlete from leaving our borders. That's just the way we believe. Corbin is a unique city. You may or may not know this, but our city sits in 3 counties, which poses its own problems. We are adjacent with 3 county districts. Those county districts, I have friends in those districts. There's some great teachers in those districts and people that I respect. However, we don't see eye to eye on everything, as usual. I've got one of every flavor as far as the non-resident agreements are concerned. I've got one county district who's adjacent to us, no problems. We've had any and all for many years. We collaborate. We're actually collaborating on a career center right now between the 2 districts. We're going to put up construction trades career centers in both districts. We're going to share kids, and we share kids with them on an ATC as well. The second district, we have a limited agreement. We get a certain number of kids, and that number is going down every year. Then the 3rd district won't even come to the table. We can't talk to them at all. And the problem with us is that, and again, this is not, I don't think, just Corbin. We have kids who live just across the line into this district who are 5 or 10 minutes from our new middle school, who are getting on a bus riding 45 minutes to the middle school that they have to go to because they're in that district. That's a bit of a problem. That's one of the toughest questions I have to answer is in the summer when parents move in or they want to change schools. They want to know how come a kid on across the creek gets to come to our district and they're not allowed to without paying the tuition. I believe that this bill addresses a very strong discriminatory practice. If you take a look, the kids who get to come to our district are the ones who can afford it right now. Our tuition is $4,000. Our board set that, and so this bill would remove that. We just don't believe that, based on geography or based on your ability to pay tuition, that should hinder where the parents want to make that choice at. This is not to say that school districts are inferior or the school districts that around us are any less. We have different things. That one of the districts the district we actually have any and all with very strong collaboration. They have a great ag program. We have kids from our district that leave and go to participate in our agricultural program. We have things that perhaps they don't have, culinary, for example. But that's kind of where we're at. I would leave it with this though, and I spoke to my board last night about coming up here today. Very quickly, it's not my board attorney, but his attorney who's on my board. He's done some research, and we shared some things last night. 9 states, and you probably already know this, so I apologize if you already know this statistic, but 9 states in the country offer open borders. Of those 9 states, 5 of them are in the top 11 ranked states academically in the state, as reported by U.S. News and World Report. That's a fairly strong statistic, and I read the comments from those states, and they're not in a hurry to go back. They like the way things are going. I know this is a bold decision for you, for all of you on the panel. It's a tough thing to ask. It's been bandied about, and this can has been kicked down the road for a long time. We ask you to make that bold decision because the underlying question, we can talk about all the statistics we want to, but the truth comes down to this: who deserves to make that choice for the kid more than the parent? We don't think anybody else should be. Thank you for your time.
Thank you both very much. Representative McCoy, do you have anyone else that needs to come in at this point?
Mr. Chairman, not that needs to come in.
I'm sorry.
But we do have other people that are here. I'd like him to mention their names and where they're from.
And
they're here to support.
I apologize. David Gibson, superintendent from Paintsville Independent. Russell Thompson from Pineville Independent. Dustin Stevenson is the finance director from Raceland High School, or Raceland District, excuse me, and Larry Coldiron, superintendent from Raceland, is also with us today. They're in the hallway.
Thank you very much. We have 2 questions. If we can get those quickly, I may have 3 questions. Get those quickly, and then we will bring presenters in for opposing view. Representative Wilner, are you available by remote?
I am, yes, thank you very much. So I guess I appreciate Representative McCoy. My questions are actually for Representative McCoy and not for the so if you want to wait until.
They're running quickly.
Okay, very good. So I appreciated your directness yesterday when you said that we don't have all of this figured out yet. And I think, the bill is very complex. It's 2 actually very complex issues put together into one extraordinarily complicated bill. This version of the bill has some never before seen changes. There's a brand new income threshold that's not been vetted by the public. And there's a brand new definition of education services provider. That's elsewhere in statute, but this has a brand new definition of that. And so since it's not all figured out yet, since there's brand new information, and since we've heard from those supporting, but we know that many, many public school advocates are opposed to this bill, I'm just curious why in the figuring it out, the K groups, the public school champions were not consulted in the drafting of this.
So, Representative, when I took over this for Leader Carney last year, I actually did meet with anybody that wanted to meet. I think Mr. Flynn will tell you he came in and met with me last year, and candidly, I made a ton of changes based on those comments. The income threshold you're referring to, we actually dropped it at everybody's request. So to say that's new language is accurate, but candidly, that's misleading. We were making a change that was requested. So I think this bill has been out there. It's been out there for years. It was a Democrat bill when it was originally filed. And at some point, we have to, what's that old phrase of continuing to do the same thing, expecting a different result is insanity? I mean, at some point we have to do something. And I think this is a good first step, and I will commit to everybody. If we do this and it needs changes afterwards, absolutely, let's get together and we'll continue to refine it just like we do all other legislation.
Thank you. Representative Riley?
Yes, I'd like to make a quick question to my good friend Gary Fields right there. Hey, Gary, how you doing, buddy?
you back up.
Gary, if this bill involves private schools, would you be in favor of it?
We have traditionally not supported tax credits for private schools, but we aren't necessarily opposed to it. We feel like public school choice is such an important legislative piece that the EOAs are part of this, and if that's part of this bill, then I can support 563 because once again, we as an independent district have had to compete with not only county districts, but we've had to compete with private schools in our community. So for us, it's not a change in kind of our everyday operations. I understand that it is for a lot of places, and so I'm sure my colleagues would not agree with me on that.
Okay, that's all I needed. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Riley. Representative Hart?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one real quick question, and I think this will probably be directed towards the superintendents. Have any of your districts been threatened with closure by other districts through the reciprocal agreement process at any time?
Well, I think for Corbin Independent and Bowling Green Independent, very large independent, we're probably the 25th or 26th largest school district in the state. So the idea of closure for us is not realistic. Now, my colleagues from Pineville, my colleagues from Raceland, my colleagues from other districts in the state have faced that threat, and that's been very clear to them. And I think that what happens is Patricia Sheffer is Superintendent of the Year, Union County. Tremendous respect for her. She tweeted back at my support of this bill and said, Gary, in Western Kentucky, in that part of the western part of the state, it's not a big deal. We have reciprocal agreements. We all get along. The problem becomes if you have a superintendent or board members that have a problem with another district, then you have threats that develop, and then you have those issues. So that can become real even in communities that aren't dealing with this right now.
All right. Thank you very much.
We're going to try to, yes. Try to. If we can, I'm going to switch to the opposing viewpoint. And I believe we have Chuck Truesdale, Director of Government Relations for the Kentucky Department of Education. Mr. Truesdale, is there anyone that would be presenting with you or that you would like to present with you?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Not
I
at this
appreciate
time?
that, though.
Okay, if you'll introduce yourself for the record, please.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Chuck Truesdale. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Kentucky Department of Education.
Will you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Proceed.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time and this opportunity. First of all, I want to thank Representative McCoy, Representative Tipton, and others who, as Representative McCoy said, have allowed the Department of Education to provide some feedback and suggestions on the original versions of House Bill 563 and House Bill 149. And we believe that the version that's in front of you right now is significantly and substantially better than the versions that were originally filed. And quite frankly, we're working with them to improve it even more because every time we run it past our folks or take another look at it, we notice another loophole or another unintended consequence that we think needs to be closed. In fact, there are still several more questions about the implementation, how it would benefit students, and again, potentially unintended consequences. We are frankly concerned that this bill passes, and then as Representative McCoy says, we come back next year and try to fix it, but you've all seen legislation, how long it takes to get those changes passed. And in the meantime, there could be dangerous effects on students, parents, families, and schools. We believe with such significant and far-reaching legislation that we'd be better served by having more thoughtful and deliberate discussion over the coming interim, and then bringing this back in 22 when all the stakeholders have gotten together in a room to discuss this and arrive at a bill that can win everybody's support. Just a few examples of some of the concerns we have. Commissioner Glass came from Colorado. where they have public school choice, and he has vocally supported the idea and the concept of public school choice. However, this particular bill is not a comprehensive solution, and I think needs more work. There's no obligation to provide transportation to the non-resident students, so it's limited, practically speaking, to students who can physically make their way. There is language in the scholarship tax credit portion that talks about using those funds for transportation to education service providers, but not to non-resident schools. And speaking of tuition, districts could charge a reasonable tuition, even as they receive tax dollars. There is language that requires KDE to provide a report that then speaks to perhaps moving local school dollars or a replacement for those local school dollars. The various parts of the bill obviously have been put together, but we don't know that there's a comprehensive solution for how the state dollars, the local dollars, and tuition is charged. We don't understand why tuition would need to be charged if the local component is brought over in some form, but I'll get to that in a minute. Number one, the Rose case, if you remember that from 30 years ago, had two key findings that impact this bill. Number one, local funds are essentially a trust that remain at the local level. And any effort to move those funds or to replace those funds, withhold state funds as a supplement, could very well be found unconstitutional. Additionally, local funds are simply a supplement to the state funds. The state is the sole provider of education in this state financially. So again, anything of that nature could be found unconstitutional and risk everything that you're working on right here. We'd like to go back and work on this some more and find a way that works for everybody. What nobody seems to have talked about yet, and I know this is a House Bill 208 conversation, hearkening back to that, there is already an option in state law that allows students to attend virtually. There is nothing in this bill that would allow one district to open up its borders, so to speak, to all students who want to attend a virtual academy and start bringing in all of those tax dollars. That I don't think has been well vetted yet, well thought out, and it needs more work. That's just one of the unintended consequences. Finally, I think somebody asked the question earlier, what about the smaller districts? There are certainly districts that would benefit from this. There are others to which this bill presents an existential threat. Those communities could very well lose their school. Even in districts where they continue to operate financially, there may be areas, because they've lost so many students, that individual schools have to close. And I know areas of rural Kentucky already know this. When you lose students, it's not like the debt service doesn't have to be paid anymore on those school buildings that are now too big for the student body that they have. Moving on to the scholarship tax credit portion, we simply have concerns about the educational service providers. KDE, particularly in recent years, has put an emphasis on evidence-based programs that are shown to positively affect student learning and achievement, but there's no emphasis on that in this bill. What educational software and applications could be used? What online learning programs could be used? I think the intent is good, and we want to continue to work on that, but the potential is certainly there for waste, fraud, and abuse. You're taking $25 million out of the state treasury and spending it on what we're not quite sure that it'll have the impact that we want. And speaking of the financial impact, this tax credit essentially diverts $25 million of general fund use for these education-related purposes. And to some degree, I think we're okay with that because that's $25 million that, quite frankly, isn't being spent on education right now. From 2009, when we spent 58% of the general fund on education, to 2020, we now only spend 52% of the general fund. In dollar terms, that's more than $700 million that is not being spent on education. $25 million is a drop in the bucket. It's 1/28 of what we should be spending. If you spent that $700 million on extended school services, which have been cut, if you spend it on friskies, if you spend it on guidance counselors for mental health services, on early literacy efforts, on professional development and teacher training, well, that money would go a lot further, I think, than what we're doing here. The one good aspect we do support is the task force. We do need to look at school funding, not just SEEK, but facilities, career and technical education, transportation, local funding options, the whole gamut of local school funding. But we don't need this bill to accomplish that. The 16-member Legislative Research Commission can establish a task force on its own and has done so in the past to look at this. So they should establish a task force in the interim and look at this. We would be happy to be a part of that and include the stakeholders like school administrators, school board members, teachers, parents, community leaders to look at how this should go forward. Again, I really appreciate Representative McCoy and others including us in the conversation at this point. We're continuing to refine the bill, but I don't think there's time necessarily in this session to make all the changes that will need to be done. And we are scared that if this bill passes now, we won't be able to make the changes necessary once it's already in law. It's too important to pass something this important and make it a mediocre or potentially harmful bill just to say we've passed something. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Flynn, were you wanting to speak?
Yes, sir.
If you will, come to the table.
Mike Borchers with me, and also remotely, Dr. Casey Allen.
Okay, if each of you will state your names for the record, including the person on remote, and then I'll administer the oath.
Okay. I'm Jim Flynn. I'm the Executive Director of the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents.
Mike Borcher, Superintendent of Ludlow Schools.
Make sure that each of you have the mics on and they're close enough so we can pick you up and those remotely can hear. And who do we have remotely?
Casey Allen, Superintendent of Ballard County Schools.
Thank you. Will all three of you raise your right hands? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Chair Petrie, members of the committee, and Representative and Majority Whip McCoy, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about House Bill 563 and the proposed substitute language that Representative McCoy presented yesterday and today. Again, I'm Jim Flynn, Executive Director of the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents. And while we support the rights of parents to choose the educational option for their child, KASS has consistently opposed any bill that proposes to privatize public funding for education. This combined bill does exactly that through tax credits for education opportunity accounts. Our schools are already underfunded in many areas, and we continue to ignore our best bets for improving educational outcomes that are well documented in the research, especially our investment in early childhood education and wellness, where long-term studies consistently demonstrate a positive return on investment. KASS has serious concerns about the potential detrimental impacts on equity and local control of this combined bill without further vetting and consideration of the unintended consequences. And there are parts of the bill in which our members have differing views, as you can already tell. And our position is that all voices need to be heard and at the table when formulating such an impactful policy. As a little background on my career in education that spans 32 years and 16 years serving as a Kentucky school superintendent, I was inspired to become an educator because of the vision, the aspiration that we've shared to provide a world-class education system that creates equitable opportunities for all students to achieve life readiness. You know, yesterday it was stated in testimony that Kentucky is the only state in this area of the country without these kinds of policies. I take that really as a point of pride that our state has stood firm in its commitment to equity for all students and has resisted policies like these that can result in more inequities, create schools that are more segregated, where poverty is more concentrated, and while further amplifying the gap between the haves and the have-nots. This bill is really two bills that have been combined, two very complicated and controversial bills, quite honestly. I heard several of you yesterday state that this is a difficult issue, that it will be a hard vote, and we understand that. You know, superintendents are accustomed to dealing with tough problems and hard issues and stand ready to be a part of the solution. The fact of the matter is that superintendents and other education stakeholder groups have not been involved in the development of the bill to the degree needed. These two policy issues combined into one very complicated bill have far-reaching implications and are being presented on the 25th day of a 30-day session and deserve a full and transparent vetting prior to a vote for enactment. You know, yesterday we heard a plea to simply pass the bill and come back next session when we have all the information and make the needed changes. Why rush to passage? We owe it to our students, families, and communities to consider all the consequences, including the unintended consequences, those known and those yet to be known, which can only be revealed in a collaborative process. There are shining examples of complicated legislation done in an inclusive, methodical, transparent process. Senate Bill 1 of 2017 was a comprehensive education reform legislation led by Senator Mike Wilson. Senator Max Wise spearheaded the School Safety and Resiliency Act of 2019. And for this session, Representative Ed Massey led the development of House Bill 258, a new tier for TRS.
Mr. Flynn, I'm going to just let you know we're at 11:40. We're out of here at 12 o'clock.
I'm done
and we
in
still
just a
have
second.
votes and we still have questions. So I'm just letting you know.
This policy deserves the same kind of inclusive, methodical, and transparent vetting before moving any further. Superintendents are willing and ready to help. You will now hear from two current Kentucky superintendents, one from a rural county district and one from an independent school district located in a more populated area of the state, who will provide more testimony on the bill. Dr. Allen.
Chairman Petrie, members of the committee, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today and share my perspective on this bill. My name is Casey Allen, and I'm the superintendent in Ballard County Schools in far western Kentucky. I'm also the president of the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents this year. Ballard County's major industry is agriculture, and our student body of 1,000 students has been experiencing a slow, steady decline for about the last decade as families look for job opportunities in more urban areas in the state. Like many Kentucky public school superintendents, I'm the CEO of the largest employer in my county. I'm also the parent of 3 children, one who's a special education educator and 2 who are special education students. As such, I can tell you from both personal and professional perspectives that not all children cost the same to educate. Legislation like House Bill 563 will lead to concentrations of high-need, vulnerable students in some districts and schools. This will further amplify the issue of haves versus have-nots in our state. Both parts of this legislation have the potential to pull funding from small rural school districts, leaving them to do harder work with less money. This will increase inequities, not increase opportunities. Another point to consider, as the largest employer in my community, legislation of this kind is detrimental to economic development. This legislation is a prescription for student loss, funding loss, and thus job loss in parts of our state that lean on school districts the most. Finally, I would ask you to consider that student enrollment in the state of Kentucky is not increasing. Across Kentucky, the majority of districts are experiencing declining enrollment. The majority of districts are small, rural school districts like mine. We are all struggling with adequate state funding, as our funding is tied to enrollment and attendance. Every time one district benefits from legislation like this, another district will be hurt. You've heard that some districts need legislation like this to stay open. Know this legislation could just as easily shut the doors of other districts. The unanswered questions of how this legislation might affect education across the Commonwealth is frightening. Kentucky school superintendents are capable and willing to approach the topics presented in this legislation and to help find solutions that work for the whole state if we're all given the opportunity. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have when we're done. I do appreciate the opportunity to be here today and that you let me do it virtually. And I would defer now to Ludlow Independent Superintendent Mike Borchers.
Chair Petrie, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today upon this bill. My name is Mike Borchers. I'm superintendent of Ludlow Independent Schools, a small independent school district in northern Kentucky where I've had my entire educational career for 26 years. The past 10 as superintendent. Just a little bit about our district. We're in an area with 3 counties that have 16 school districts, so competition is always vast. We are made up of 71% of our student population is considered disadvantaged. We have a 98% graduation rate. Our ACT scores rank in the top 20% in the state, and our student population is made up of 18% non-resident students. We currently have 8 non-resident contract agreements, 3 with county districts, 5 with independent districts. I believe that we have a strong, positive non-resident agreement throughout the state that are approved by local boards of education. Some of the negative stories that you hear about non-resident agreements, I believe, are isolated throughout the state. I know that for every issue, there are positive and negative stories to support any case. I could give you countless stories of both resident and non-resident students who have gone on to success by overcoming numerous obstacles after they have graduated those schools. We have a strong school system that works, that is under the current system. You may ask, why am I here today testifying about open enrollment when we have non-resident agreements in Ludlow? It's because I don't believe that the open enrollment contracts or the educational opportunity accounts are the root of the issue. The issue is the underfunding of public schools. In a former life, I was a math teacher, so I like to use data. It was just mentioned before earlier by the Kentucky Department of Education. But since 2018, we have seen a decline in the SEEK funding at the state level, which has enforced our local level SEEK funding to be increased. That has resulted in local real estate taxes throughout the state by increasing by 29% over the last 12 years. Very people who have had to make the difficult decisions on the funding of our public schools, our local boards of education, are being told that their ability to enter into a negotiated non-resident contract with their neighboring districts is being taken away from them. We are trying to pass legislation to address an issue that will not address the true cause of the inequities in our schools. Yesterday, during the joint hearing, it was discussed that the EOAs could support many of the things the public schools offer for free on a regular basis. One comment hit home. It was the discussion about students using EOAs to purchase textbooks. The last year that the legislature has been able to fund instructional materials, i.e. textbooks, and professional development was fiscal year 2018. Both are important resources to help improve the educational environment of schools. The local boards of education took on that role and funded those programs in our district. Would you like to know the cost of the state for the state to fund every instructional material and PD throughout the entire state? That number is $25.8 million. Kind of an ironic number as we talk about this bill today. I know my time is limited, so I'd like to make a few last statements. I've been superintendent for 10 years, and every year the legislature is in the budget cycle, we hear there is a funding crisis. I'd like to ask you a few things before you make your vote today. A reminder, as Mr. Flynn spoke, House Bill 258 was created by Representative Massey to address the pension issue. The actuarial analysis says that it'll save the state $3.5 billion. It was done collaboratively. When you look at the fiscal notes about this bill, expenditures, indeterminable. Net effect, indeterminable. Those are questions that when I hear the legislators talk are very answers that you ask for before you vote on bills. Tax credits and EOAs. There's a 2000 study by the very legislators here that recommended no new tax credits and to sunset some of the existing tax credits that are out there. We know that our legislators are going to be working to do tax modernization in the very near future. Why not wait and do this along with that with the help of the State Department and other stakeholders? We know there's a major infrastructure in our region in northern Kentucky. Representative Santor has been working on that for many, many years. We know that every dollar counts, so we're asking you not to give away dollars for things that we can't control. And the last thing I'd like to make a point of is scholarship mechanisms are already in place. Students and donors who want to give to these scholarship opportunities have a mechanism in place now. We came today to ensure that you know a different side and ask you to not make a decision without the proper time to discuss the unintended consequences that a combined bill like this may have. Allow us to work in the interim to study the topic and develop a plan to ensure that we have the workable non-resident agreements in place throughout our state. A quick vote on something that could change the landscape for public education for generations of students to come needs more time to be studied. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. I had first up for a question Representative Fleming. And just so everyone knows, we're at 11:49. Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
there's a lot to be unpacked with the gentleman and the gentleman on the virtual that I could love to ask you questions in terms of economic development and you being a CEO. I've been there before. I think we have a serious issue in front of us, and it's called low ranking in education. And if we don't sit there and try to think outside the box, then we're going to be further behind. In fact, we're going to be number 50th in the state. I have a question for the Representative McCoy, please. I will. As you approach, Representative, I just want to ask you two things. Hopefully you give me a concise question. I've made a reference in the past about being a donut hole. Could you give me a perspective on the donut hole of Kentucky as a center of that donut hole? And the other thing, I want you to expand a little bit on liberty, which I think is a core issue in terms of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness that goes back to the Declaration of Independence. And if we don't sit there and look at and focus on liberty and who we are and where we're going, I think we really need to think twice. I appreciate your response.
Thank you, Representative. So right now, West Virginia and Missouri are the last two states that touch us that don't have legislation like this. They're passing them. So when you put us on a map, you can color in around us. It's us. We're the only state without this. You want to talk economic development? You know the tax policy as well as I do. You're looking to bring a business to this state. Why would you come here when you go to Indiana? Better taxes, better schools, school choice, things that parents and workers are looking for. And that hits right home on the liberty. I mean, who knows what's best for kids? The mom and dad or the guardian, whoever is there. And that is absolutely just a fundamental tenet for me personally and from our Constitution.
Thank you, Representative Fleming. Representative Raymond.
Thank you. I've been facilitating virtual instruction for the last year, and I don't know as well as my children's teachers what they need to learn. I read this bill, particularly the second part about education opportunity accounts, as a concerned mom trying to get a kindergartner and a first grader to read. And I think that this was not designed with those end users in mind. For families, I'm wondering, how do they choose an AGO? How do they budget, not knowing year to year how much money they'll receive from the AGO? They don't know the list of providers. They don't know what sort of outcomes to expect. Can you speak to the family experience that's not described in the bill?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we've got to get this bill going so that those things will be developed. Because, I mean, think about it right now. You know exactly what your kids need. And if your kid needed a speech, help with speech, I'm just going to use that as an example, you would start to do all the research around you. You would ask people. You would find out. There will be resources available once we pass this. The Department of Revenue is going to be intimately involved in regulating this. I think all of that stuff is going to come, and we'll all be there to help. These EAOs are going to want to help these parents get to those resources. So I think what we're going to see is all of that develops.
Thank you, Representative Raymond. Representative Bentley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Most people know I'm from Eastern Kentucky, and I was privileged to grow up and have a good education, but I'm tired of being in the bottom percentage in the United States. I deal with obesity, I deal with diabetes, I deal with heart, stroke, and education. One man in my county was a Pulitzer Prize winner, and he said, write something to suit yourself and many people will like it. Write something to suit everybody and scarcely anyone will care for it. Jesse Stewart. So let's write something to try to get out of this box. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Bentley. Representative Hatton, and we are at 11:53.
Mr. Chair, I have a lot to say, but I know that KEA is waiting online. Could we hear from KEA?
I would love to. I have 2 or 3 organizations online and speakers, and so I'm trying to give members of this committee an opportunity to make a comment or ask a question before we go to vote in under 2 minutes.
Okay. So my comment.
We can stay later.
Yeah.
This room has to be vacated at 12, so I've been told another committee is coming in.
Well, in that case, I would
right.
move that we table the conversation then. We need more time to talk. Very important stakeholders are asking to speak. I mean, I can sit here and make my comments, but I think that very much more important perspectives are being ignored if we're trying to just close this thing out.
No one's going to be ignored. And this is the deal. We had a discussion only yesterday. This has been out and about for a while. I've received, others have received comments from many people. Written statements can always be received. Written statements can always be submitted to the committee, and I'll look at them to have them distributed. And I cannot and I do not have time to have everybody speak today. There are too many thousands of people that will be interested in the issue, and I'm glad they are, but we do not have the bandwidth to do that in this committee assignment. If there's no further questions.
Motion on the bill.
A motion on the bill, second. I'm sorry. Motion two. All in favor? I know, I didn't get a second on it. I'm just asking out of courtesy. No second. I've got a second. All in favor? All opposed? No. Motion fails. We have a motion and a second on the bill. Seeing nothing else, call roll.
Representative Beckler.
Aye.
Representative Beckler, aye. Representative Bentley.
Yes.
Representative Bentley, yes. Representative Blanton. Representative Bridges.
Yes.
Representative Bridges, yes. Representative Dossett.
Yes.
Representative Dossett, yes. Representative Fisher.
Yes.
Representative Fisher, yes. Representative Fleming.
Yes.
Representative Fleming, yes. Representative Flood.
Explaining my vote briefly.
Very briefly.
I vote no to this disruptive, divisive, detrimental bill. It especially is undercutting local control. Very disappointed to see this turn of events.
Representative Fugit.
No.
Representative Fugit, no. Representative Gentry. Representative Goforth.
Briefly explain my vote.
Very briefly.
I vote yes, and I'd like to thank the bill sponsor for addressing every concern that I brought to him from my superintendents and everyone else that had contacted me over the past 4 sessions about this bill to make sure that no one will be discriminated against. It will not be used as a ploy for sports. It is focused on the poorest of the poor in our community, and it focuses on public school students and provides extra services that they're not able to get in their current schools. So thank you. I vote yes.
Representative Goforth, yes. Representative Hale.
May I quickly explain? I'll be very brief.
Very brief.
7 years I've sat in this role. I have never been a big advocate of school choice. I never have. But I've never spoke out adamantly against it, but I've never voted in favor of a school choice bill since I've been here. But these last 12 months of our children not being able to be in person in their school districts has disturbed me greatly. And my constituents are overwhelmingly asking me to vote yes, to give them that opportunity to make the choice that's best for their children. So, Mr. Chairman, I vote yes today.
Representative Hart.
No.
Representative Hart, no. Representative Hatton.
Explain my vote. I am told that the committee sub is still not available online for the public to read. I know a lot of people may think they've had enough time to understand this. An awful lot of people think that they don't. I think that a lot of the school superintendents who came today to speak in favor of this are in favor of one part of the bill, but may live to regret voting for this bill as it's combined with 2 parts. And every school district or every state that has passed any kind of a school choice law has eventually gone to a full choice law. This is a camel getting its nose under the tent. I'm afraid that we will regret this mightily when we go about funding public education. My school superintendent is concerned that lots of small districts would lose students and therefore not be able to provide quality services for all students. And it would disadvantage some districts that would never be able to compete and would further divide for our low socioeconomic students. This will cause a concentration, as one of the superintendents said, of minority, lower functioning, lower test scoring kids in the schools. It benefits wealthier kids, no matter how we try to say it. When you have to pay for your own transportation, the kids at the head of the hollers, the kids whose parents have to work and can't get them to school, will not benefit from this. It needs a lot more development discussion. I'm terribly disappointed that KEA wasn't allowed to testify today. No.
Representative Nemus.
Briefly explain, Mr. Chairman.
Very briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is, I'm going to thank the sponsor for his work on this bill. I know there's been a lot of work. I've got some significant problems with various portions. I've talked with the sponsor about those. We're working on amendments to those, and I understand there might be other amendments. This is part of the process. I'm voting yes to get it out, but Representative McCoy, I want you to know I'm not a yes on the floor right now. I need a few amendments to this. In particular, on Section 3, we've already talked about with respect to letting the local school district have their own capacity issues, and also with respect to Section 5 on the SEEK stuff. If we're going to be serious about it, we need to talk about consolidation. We need to talk about a lot of things. But as it is right now, I will be a no on the floor unless some things change. But it's part of the process to get it through, and appreciate the work that you've done on this and others, and I'll vote yes to get it out of committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Representative Palumbo.
No.
Representative Palumbo, no. Representative Prunty.
Yes.
Representative Prunty, yes. Representative Raymond.
It's not going to do what it says it's going to do. I vote no.
Representative Raymond, no. Representative Reed. Representative Reed, yes. Representative Riley.
Briefly explain, if we're serious about improving education in Kentucky, especially for its low-income students, we will fully fund kindergarten, we will hire more reading interventionists, and we will put more money into preschool education. Thank you.
Was that a...
I think that's a no.
Okay. Representative Riley, no. Representative Santoro? Yes. Representative Santoro, yes. Representative Tipton?
Briefly explain my vote, Mr. Chairman. As I have researched this issue and studied it, this is my 7th session now. One dynamic that I have noticed in this debate is we have the professional education community, and then we have the parents seem to be on opposite ends of this, because as Representative Hale said, my constituents have asked for this overwhelmingly. And I sincerely believe that parents are the best equipped to make the most appropriate decisions for their children's education. I vote yes, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Tipton, yes. Representative Wilner?
Briefly explain, as has already been noted, this committee substitute has not been made available to the public. This is an enormously consequential bill that has not been vetted by parents, by public educators, or even by private educators. So I vote no.
Representative Wilner, no. Chairman Petrie.
Very briefly, first, on the committee subs, they're not published on the website for this committee. The committee sub to this particular bill was made public by email to all members, and I personally sent it out to people I thought would be in opposition last Friday to make sure everyone had opportunity to see that, and did that to many, many, many people and organizations. The bill itself is a good first step that has work, as almost all bills do. Sometimes a step has to be taken in order to make progress rather than perfectly knowing where you're going to go and how you're going to get there. Also, there was a comment made about where money's supposed to come from and where it's supposed to go and who's entitled to it. And a personal preference I have is that if I cannot tell whether there is an increase or a decrease to an activity, whether it's getting better or worse, if I don't have a measurement, a metric by which I can measure that, then I'm not particularly in favor of funding anything. So a common complaint that I hear is, wait a minute, we should put money into something. And I ask, how will we know whether it's getting better if we put money into it? Whether that be education, whether it be economic development, whether it be roads, whether it be anything. So when we start those conversations about why and where money's supposed to be going, somebody better be coming forward with metrics of whether we're getting better or not. I'll vote yes to get this out of committee. It goes to the floor. There's some further work I know that's being worked on. I appreciate the efforts on it so far. We have a title amendment. All in favor? All opposed? Title amendment is adopted. House Bill 563 as amended by committee sub, having received 14 yes votes, 8 no votes and 0 pass will be reported from this committee with favorable expression that same should pass on the floor. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.